We've been going through the Old Testament and showing that the word wine that was used in the Old Testament doesn't necessarily mean alcoholic drinks. That there are some bias in our translations, some difficulties in translating that word, because some of the words that are in the Old Testament, yain in particular, is a word that covers a broad range of products. And so that necessarily, when you see the word wine, doesn't necessarily mean this alcoholic. We also looked at last week a little bit about the production of wine, and actually of how they were able to take grape juice and store it, and they didn't have technology back then in order to make it such that it did not ferment. And they had various ways to cause that to happen. And we also looked at some of the verses in the New Testament to say that not every time it says the word wine in the New Testament, which the Greek word there is oinos, does it necessarily mean fermented drink. But what I said last week and what I'd like to do today is go from it at a different point of view, and that's to look at some of the words that we don't normally look at and don't normally think about. There's a Greek word that's called nephaleus, or nepho is the verb, and I'll write it down here. That's the adjective, nepho is the verb. It is actually a combination of two words. It's a combination of the Greek word for ne, which means not in our English language, and believe it or not, pin, and that means not to drink. And from that we get the word sober. I know it doesn't look as close in our language as it does in the Greek, but that's the way it goes. In the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, it says the concept which underlies the verb nepho, to be sober, and the whole word group is formally negative. It is the opposite of intoxication, both in the literal sense of intoxication with wine and in the figurative sense of states of intoxication attributable to other causes. Probably the best illustration of this, there's a statement by a Jewish philosopher named Philo, and he gives this particular definition. He says, so too soberness, and he's saying nephein, and drunkenness are opposites. He's saying this word, nephaleos or nephos, is the opposite of drunkenness. Little and Scott in their book defines it as to be sober, to drink no wine. One of the early Christian writers, Clement of Alexandria, once said, I therefore admire those who have adopted a austere life, and austere in there is nephalein, who are fond of water, the medicine of temperance, and flee as far as possible from wine, shunning it as they would the danger of fire. Okay, I just wanted you to see what they thought this word meant. When they looked at the word sober, they were looking at somebody who was staying as far away from intoxicating drinks as they could get. Probably the best illustration of this is in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 4. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, starting with verse 4. But you, brethren, are not in the darkness, that the day should overtake you like a thief. For you are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of night or of darkness. So then let us not sleep as others do, but let us be alert and sober. For those who sleep do their sleeping at night, and those who get drunk at night. But we are of the day. Let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet the hope of salvation. Now what I want you to notice is there is a series of contrasts being presented here. And we're saying, for instance, he's saying, we are the light, we're not of darkness. He also tells us that we are, get my list here. Excuse me. He says we need to be awake. And if you look in that passage, the opposite he says is those who fall asleep. He also tells us that we need to be sober. And if you notice it was in the opposite of that passage, he says they're drunk. Sober here is this word nephaleos. The opposite of it is to be drunk, just like all those other writers stated. It is apparent that Paul desires the Thessalonians to be alert. Christ is going to come back. We cannot be off duty. We cannot be off our guard. When he tells the Thessalonians to be alert, he's telling them that they need to be mentally awake, to be watchful. And when he's saying to be sober, he's telling them to be physically abstinent, because that's really what that word means. In fact, alertness is often connected with abstinence of intoxicating beverages. Go back to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12 and verse 45. Talking about the faithful steward who's always on the alert for when the master might come back. And Luke chapter 12 verse 45, he says, "But if that slave says in his heart, my master will be a long time in coming, and begins to beat the slaves, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk." What happens when a person doesn't think they're on duty? What happens when a person thinks that they're not going to be needed at any moment in time? A lot of people in the world get drunk. And so physical abstinence is being contrasted with drinking. Over in 1 Peter chapter 1, we see this again. 1 Peter chapter 1, and in verse 13, it says, "Therefore gird your minds for action, keep sober, fix your hope completely on the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ." And here again we see mental vigilance being tied with physical abstinence. Unfortunately, you can see the translator's bias if you have a New American Standard Bible. I skipped over the added words. You'll find two words in italics there, in spirit. And so there's translation says, keep sober in spirit. Well, in spirit is not in there. The word there is nephaleos, and it means to be abstinent. And he's using it as in opposite of drunkenness. There's also another word in here which is interesting, is that just after nepho, after saying be sober, there's a word that's teleos in the Greek. It's an adverb which means fully. And grammatically, it can modify sober, that's the word that comes before it, or it can modify the fixture mind which comes after it. In other words, there's some debate about whether this fully goes with sober, or does the fully go with the fixture mind. Most translators of modern translations attach it to fixture hope. And so, like for instance, in this translation it says, fix your hope completely on the grace. And that's partly because they believe that the Bible teaches moderation, so they couldn't say, well, it can't be with the other word, with sober. What's interesting, though, is if you go to older translations like the Latin Vulgate, they attach the word completely to the word sober. And so it reads in the Latin Vulgate, if we translated that into English, to be perfectly sober, or being wholly abstinence in this particular verse. And so Peter is saying, gird your mind for action. Get ready. Keep abstinent. Keep sober. And fix your hope, and either be completely sober or fix your hope completely on the grace which is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. We don't know when Jesus is coming again. We need to be ready at any moment in time. And that's why the warning there is, don't relax in being a Christian. Another verse that we need to look at is in 1 Peter chapter 5, in verse 8. And again, physical abstinence is joined with mental abstinence, or mental vigilance. Be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. But resist him firm in your faith, knowing that the same experience of suffering is being accomplished by your brethren who are in the world. Now, this passage is particularly interesting because the wording very much corresponds with what is found in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 6, which we read earlier. What's really interesting is that word is at the very end. Seeking someone to devour. Because actually the word in the Greek is kapian, which means to drink down. It actually literally means to drink down. So the beginning of this passage, which is be sober, don't drink, is being contrasted with at the end of this sentence, drink down. Adam Clark says it's not everyone that he can swallow down. Those who are sober and vigilant are proof against him. These he may not swallow down. There's a beauty in this verse, striking apposition between the first and last words, which I think many have not noticed. Be sober, the sayet, of the form ne, not, and pene, to drink. Do not swallow down, the word kapian, from kapta, down, and paean, to drink. If you swallow strong drink down, the devil will swallow you down. Hear this, you drunkards, toppers, tipplers, or whatever so name you are known in society, or among your fellow sinners. Strong drink is not your only way to is not only your way to the devil, but the devil's way into you. You are such as the devil particularly may swallow down. There's a play, basically what he's saying is a play on words here. Don't start drinking things down because the devil might swallow you down. Be sober, be vigilant, be abstinent, or Satan will get to you. There's another word in the Greek, which is sophron,